Hello, this is the third and final part of the 2021 support report. Let's report, so to say, on the support. As per the annual mandate, we have copious amounts of Blue Eye support to wade through, so let's rip that band-aid off along with the limb it's attached to. We're starting off with the level 4, Tyrant of D. This has to stop. He's got a sweet little attack redirection effect as an homage to his roots in the year 1999, but what you should really care about here is all the setup. Dumping a Blue Eyes from the hand or deck while putting a monster in the field is fantastic, especially given this deck's level of recovery. This just by itself would be pretty good, but its on-field effect, letting you discard a Blue Eyes support card to summon any Blue Eyes monster from the graveyard, props it up to great. This way you can dump your white stones and either search, recover, or summon more vanilla Blue Eyes from the deck. Absolutely run 3 of these. Quick mention to Chronicle Magician. You summon it if a Dark Magician or a Blue Eyes hits the field, and then it gives them 2500 attack points. If you're staring down Utopia the Lightning in the main phase and can make this in the same turn you plan to battle said Lightning, go for it. Otherwise, throw this into the Nostalgia Pander bin along with half the cards Dark Magician ever got. The real star of the show here is obviously Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, the thing that exists because Kaiba refused to accept that he will never be able to be inside of a Blue Eyes White Dragon. I know it's the same joke I made about last year's support, but blame Konami for giving me easy material. Jet Dragon is okay. It doesn't offer much in the way of extending your plays, but giving destruction immunity to the rest of your field while being decently easy to summon is fine. It helps that you can trigger it by using alternate popping effect, so it's not limited to flying in during the opponent's turn, and you could potentially use it for an Xyz play. The battle effect might come in handy in a pinch, but it's not really the card's primary purpose. Overall, it's a fine one-off. Running 2 would make your whole field immune to effect destruction, but the hit to consistency is not worth it. A very odd piece of support and a new boss monster Blue Eyes got came in the form of Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. I say odd because this is a monster basically lifted straight from a mistake in the English dub where Blue Eyes White Dragon equipped with Tyrant Burst Dragon was referred to as Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. Furthermore, this thing's stats and the multi-attack effect are literally just the vanilla Blue Eyes with Tyrant Burst Dragon as its equip, with added trap immunity and the ability to recover traps from the graveyard after battle. It's a real asspool of a reference, but it's essentially a straight upgrade over Tyrant Burst because, for one, you don't have to run gimmicky anime bullshit that fuses monsters and battle traps. For a vanilla Blue Eyes and 1 Dragon monster, you get a fat beater with multiple attacks and a bit of protection and recovery. It's true that you have to be running a fusion-centric build to be able to summon it in the first place, but with their new fusion spell, that's hardly an issue. Barring the downright baffling origin of the card, it's a fun boss monster to make as an alternative to Twin Burst. And their aforementioned new fusion spell is the very confidently named Ultimate Fusion. It shuffles the resources from anywhere aside from the Banish Zone into your deck, pops targets on the field if you used any onboard materials, is a quick play so it comes with interruption, and as a fun bonus, it can also summon Dragon Master Knight. It probably won't be doing that 99.9% of the time, but I'm sure there's somebody out there crying tears of joy over that line of text. This is a great fusion spell all around, offering recovery and potential removal along with summoning a beefy monster, usually alternative Ultimate Dragon for even more destruction, so it can also be a strong comeback enabler. While not searchable by Abyss, unlike the vanilla polymerization, it can be added by other cards in the deck, so it's fine enough at 1 or 2. Their other new spell is Apparition with Eyes of Blue. This is a continuous spell with a once per turn effect that basically lets you tag out a monster on the field for a Blue Eyes White Dragon in your hand, or vice versa. This is not amazing, but it offers some fun options like resummoning Dragon Spirit of White for more back row removal, or returning the tuners to your hand to reuse their search effects later. The important thing to keep in mind is that it targets, so while gimmicky, it's also intended to be used with Maiden, giving you an extra copy of Blue Eyes with every activation. The thing is, it doesn't offer a lot that you can't already do by playing the deck as normal, so while the ability to summon any monster from the hand by swapping a Blue Eyes gives options for fun tech, it's really not a good choice in usual Blue Eyes builds. Jank enthusiasts are gonna love this one though. The last Blue Eyes card, hopefully, for this year is True Light. For this one they just looked at Eternal Soul's homework and copied it almost word for word while insisting nobody will notice. Instead of unaffected, it makes your Blue Eyes untargetable, it takes your monsters along with it when destroyed, and once per turn, you can either summon a Blue Eyes from the hand or graveyard, or set a Blue Eyes support card from your deck that you don't already control or is in your graveyard. It's marginally different from its Dark Magician counterpart, offering weaker protection but a better search effect. It's not as immediate as Bingo Machine, but it does do away with the RNG factor, which makes one-offs like Destined Rivals way more viable. The self-nuke on destruction is a gamble as usual, but indulging yourself in this amount of consistency should come with a bit of a cost. This search card by itself is also searchable, so you figure out the ratios for yourself. This wave of Blue Eyes support is certainly a wave of Blue Eyes support. Nothing outlandish going on, the surprises are mild and brief, and the artwork is as conventionally pretty as ever. In other news, water is wet, grass is green, and there's a new edition of Skyrim on sale. Next archetype. After a deserved period of rest, chilling out with all the generic zombie support, vampires are once again in the spotlight with 4 new cards. First up is Vampire Ghost Ogre. No, not that one. You wish you hit it that good. This is a nice bit of setup in the form of what's essentially the first truly solid opener for the archetype. It builds up the graveyard, searches targets like Scarlet Scourge or Shadow Vampire, and dumps retainers and familiars for additional setup, usually with itself as a tribute. While in the graveyard, you can either banish it on your turn for high-level extenders, or for a spicier option, on the opponent's turn while you control Sucker and Zombie World as a quick archetypal kaiju. This is a cool lineup of effects, but Ghost Ogre suffers from, well, being a vampire card. It gives enough setup to rival the playstarters of some combo decks, but the overall design of the archetype sometimes screws it over. The discard cost can be a curse as much as a blessing, because the majority of vampire stuff still doesn't actually float, so you often find yourself having to get rid of valuable monsters or back row. The cards it searches and dumps are important playmakers for the deck, but they also expend additional resources to use, and it's not rare that you quickly run out of said resources before making anything relevant with them. Also, unless you discarded one of the low-level vampires for cost, a single Ash Blossom will completely shut you down, but to be fair, that also applies to the rest of the deck because it basically falls apart after any negate. It's still a very good card, it's just that most of its downsides are downsides of the archetype itself. Don't hate Ghost Ogre, hate Ghost Ogre's stupid quirky family. For instance, here's Vampire Voivode. He's like a Dracula or a Nosferatu. Honestly, this is just a weird array of abilities altogether. It steals 2 monsters from the opponent's graveyard when normal summoned, negates the effects of monsters while a monster with the same name is in a graveyard, and if a monster is special summoned from the opponent's graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters to summon Voivode from yours. It comes off kinda demanding and directionless at first, and while it's true that the archetype mandated Dracula could have been a more conventional boss monster, it does play decently well into what the archetype is supposed to be doing. Normal summoning it is not too much of a hassle with Sucker's Kaiju effect or the floating from Sorcerer, although you won't be doing that too often anyway. If you do manage to activate the on-summon effect, you get free materials for Lynx or any of the Vampire Xyz that treat the opponent's monsters controlled by you as their required level. The negation effect sounds a bit too specific, but it goes off surprisingly often given how many 3-offs people run these days. Funnily enough, it also kinda plays in with the original Vampire Bleed gimmick, which is a treat in the rare occasions you get to access it. I just wish it was a continuous negate instead of a once per turn, but whatever. Finally, the self-revival is a bit costly, but your extra deck monsters make the condition relatively easy to activate, and usually put enough bodies on the field for the cost. Once again with the downside, I wish Sucker would actually let you tribute the opponent's monsters outside of tribute summoning, which would make Voivode's recursion a potential removal effect, but I imagine the separation of Zombie World and Lair of Darkness means way more to Konami than it does to me. I find Voivode really confusing, because while it's definitely one of the most deceptively good legacy support cards I've seen, you don't want to play more than one, mainly because of how much of an investment it is. I will say I do like how the effect represents Dracula's repeated resurrection and assembling his servants. I'm always a sucker for that shit. However, even after all that, we're still somehow not done with Voivode, as we also get his upgraded form as the rank 8 Xyz, the Undead Vampire. This one's a lot easier to wrap your head around though. You can summon it the same way as Sheridan, meaning the opponent's monsters you control count as level 8 materials. It's untargetable by monsters summoned from anywhere but the graveyard, which is an ostensibly spiteful protection effect, and once per turn you can detach material to mill 4 cards from both players' decks and then summon any monster milled by this effect to your field. This is a solid boss and even a play extender if you hit any monsters with the mill, but summoning it is a bit of a chore. Voivode isn't always a guaranteed field presence, let alone with a monster the opponent owns, but it does kind of incentivize the deck to go second because there might be stuff to fetch from the graveyard. It feels great when you're actually able to make it and get the effect off, but to reiterate, any piece of interruption against this deck might as well be all 5 pieces of Exodia. Much like Sheridan, this is a neat one-off for the extra deck. The final piece of Vampire support here is the Link 3 Vampire Fascinator. This is a logical climb from Sucker, as it pulls an opponent's monster from the graveyard directly to your field and offers a change of heart every turn. It's probably the most consistent archetypal way to get a hold of the opponent's stuff, and another good reason to go second. She doesn't offer the field-wide zombie tribute option, but Sucker is relatively easy to recover with Awakening or Desire, and it helps to run more of them anyway, so it's not a prevailing issue. I really do wish it did something on its own though. I mean, as much as I think this new monster stealing playstyle is cool, the deck really needs some stuff to do by itself. But I guess the effect fits the name, and at least it runs up the consistency of Vampire support having absolutely gorgeous artwork. Run 1 or 2 of these. No pun intended relating to the previous card, but Vampire support is so fascinating. The 2013 wave attempted to keep the bleed effect focus while introducing Xyz mechanics, then 5 years later they said fuck that and decided graveyard snatch steal shenanigans with life point costs are the way to go, in a rare act of a full-on archetype remake. They thankfully seem to have decided to keep going with the latter, although in a bit of a weird direction, because the ratio of low-level playmakers to monster snatching bosses in this wave of support would ideally be reversed. I feel like vampires are one small batch of cards away from being a fairly dangerous archetype to deal with, as long as they can iron out their consistency and stop having to scoop after getting hit by one hand trap. Now let's quickly look at the new Signer Dragon synchros and skim over the support because that's just what I did did in this video and will keep doing whenever they get new cards. Majestic Star Dragon finally got its overdue update with shooting Majestic Star Dragon, and it basically fixes everything wrong with Majestics. I do miss the nuke and effect stealing abilities, which were the coolest parts of the original, but what we got as a replacement is a way easier to summon multi-attacking Omninegate, which doesn't get homesick for the extra deck during the end phase, and features absolutely hideous, completely incomprehensible pile of shapes as the artwork, as is the Stardust tradition. You could argue that all the uniqueness of the Majestic gimmick got washed away with this card in favor of yet another Stardust Synchro Negate Fest, but to be fair, the originals also got accommodated to an extent. This wave of support came with some very handy combo pieces, including a partial replacement for the first Majestic Dragon, a spell that can set it up and gives you draw power, and a Synchron that searches out Stardust support cards. Alongside those, there's a decent amount of new generic Stardust support that has a good place in Majestic decks in varying ratios. There's also the brand new Ruddy Rose Dragon, a long-awaited upgrade to the beloved classic, and well, it's a fine generic level 10 synchro. Wiping the graveyards on summon and then the rest of the field if you use Black Rose or a plant synchro monster to summon it is in line with the usual shtick, but wouldn't it make more sense to nuke the field first and then banish the graveyards? You know, I can name a couple dragons that can do very similar things to these, but in any order you want. This one also comes with Destruction Negation, although at a bit of a cost, which is easier to recover from if you're playing a dedicated Rose Dragon deck. These are still not great, but you will get some teamed consistency if anything. It's also kinda weird how it doesn't treat bringing out a Black Rose as a synchro summon, but they probably thought a negate into a field nuke was too much of a signature ability to steal from Majestic Star Dragon. It's good for what it is, but it could be a bit better. And that was all for this support report. Remember to wash your greens, eat your hands, and drive only at 1/3 of the speed limit. I'll see you next time. And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed just to get it all up what's in my head. Hallelujah. And I wake in the morning and it's and I take a deep breath and get rid of my scream off of my lungs. What's going on? And I say, is it still recording? Weird.